Hello, and welcome back to Dumb Defenses, where we travel through time and across the world to bring you the weirdest cases. I'm Frankie,
I'm Judah.
and I think Judah's going first this week.
I am. I had promised you a case called Sweet Fanny Adams, which I indicated was I picked based entirely off the name. Should have read it first. It's
Oh
about the
no.
brutal murder of a child
Oh
in
dear.
England. So we are gonna skip that.
Fair.
Today I'm gonna talk to you about the legal journey of an Australian man called Jared Hyams. So this started in about 2010.
Okay.
Jared Himes was moving around, and every time you have to move, you have to fill out a bunch of official paperwork to change your residence. And he was really sick and he was moving a lot, so he was drawing just lines across a lot of the documents. And that worked fine. And one time, thinking that nobody was going to look at it, he just, as his signature, drew dick and balls.
Okay, that's a way to do it.
And that was rejected by some government agencies as not being
What?
a valid signature. This is going to be a short one today, but I just love the just stickiness. So from Vice.com, an article by Mitchell Sunderland called "An Australian Man Has Won the Right to Draw a Penis as His Signature." From the Sydney Morning Herald, Melbourne man faces stiff opposition
Oh my god.
to penis signature by Bo Donnelly. And from Lawyers Weekly, phallic signature inspires legal career by Laura Bullock. So he draws dick and balls and he gets pushback, and just out of pure spite, stubbornness, this man goes on a multiple year legal fight against different Australian states and different governmental authorities to win the right to draw a penis and testicles as his signature. The government said a couple of things about that it was offensive and that it was too easy to replicate. He's fighting to say, who are you to tell me what can be my signature? His case is repeatedly thrown out of court. He's threatened with contempt of court,
Oh
but
no.
ultimately, after a 5-year legal battle, he wins the right to have a penis and testicles as his signature in Australia. He had it on his ID, on his student ID, on his bank account information was a dick and balls. Yeah. But his argument was, who are you, government, to tell me what my signature should be? People just draw squiggles as their signature.
Which are way more easy to copy.
Yeah, he says it all started because, quote, I was moving around a bit and had to sign these electoral, in brackets, registration forms. And one day he just decided to draw a penis. This drew the attention of a pornographic actor named Kieran Lee, who said, quote, I think it's a great idea to have your dick as your signature. I'm jealous I didn't think of it since I use mine to cash checks on a regular basis. Then later on, apparently this fight inspired Mr. Himes to go into the legal field.
Oh god, was he signing legal pleadings with a penis?
I don't know if he is, because when attention stops wrapping up around him, he wins the right to draw dick and balls as his signature the same year that he's finishing up his law degree at Victoria University. And I think that that's a heck of a hill to die on, but he picked.
That's what I was gonna say. Like the fact that that is the thing that you spend 5 years litigating is a little over the top.
Multiple levels of litigation,
Yeah.
getting thrown out of court, getting threatened with complaints of sexual harassment, and then ultimately, okay, you're going to become a lawyer. Are you going to keep a dick and balls as your? Yeah, are you going to sign legal pleadings with a dick? Who's going to hire
and who's
you?
gonna hire you?
Like, respectfully submit this application, dick and balls at the bottom. I would take a look at that, and that application would go right in the shredder.
Well, not even hire him at the firm, but also like as a client. Maybe that porn star would, but other people would probably be like, "That's super unprofessional, and I don't want to be associated with you as my attorney."
I mean, it would be hilarious if you went into like a specialized field, like representing pornographic actors
Yeah,
and pornography companies, and they might think it's hilarious that their actually qualified lawyer has
uses this as the signature.
uses this as a signature. That wraps up today's fun. What is a legal signature, and can you just draw dick and balls?
And apparently the answer is yes.
Apparently, the answer is yes. And in the United States, it's any mark that manifests your intent to be bound for what constitutes like a signature on a contract.
And if this is the way you want to be contractually bound, then
Yep.
have at it.
One could definitely argue that a dick and ball still counts in the United States. That is from Australia. I found that to be a much funnier thing to read about and talk about, because as soon as I went through this book, that I was like, oh, I'm going to read because I just picked this because it had Fanny in the name, and I was like, haha, it's dirty, and I was like, nope, no.
That's a more serious case.
Yeah, let's do Dick Guy. So we went from Fanny to Dick.
Yep. Well, I am sticking with my Matrix defense, and I had actually never seen the movie in full, so I watched it last night so I would be prepared to do this today.
I got some texts from your husband.
Was he like, oh my god, I can't believe Frankie's never watched this movie?
Let's go back. Frankie is watching The Matrix for the first time, quote, for research, and I assume this is your doing, so you get to have me live tweet their experience at you. Here's a quotation from you. Is this set in present day? Another quote from you. I will not be answering any questions. Then he says,
No. I asked him, is this set in present day to the recording? So like in 1999, and he said, I will not be answering any questions.
Oh, okay, that clarifies it. And then he says, only 2 reactions so far: chuckling at the cartoon imprint in the street when Neil fails the jump program, and quote, his glasses don't have earpieces. So that was your husband's experience at me of your watching The Matrix in full. I saw that years ago, 20 plus years ago.
I was definitely movie deprived as a child, so there's that. Anyways, diving into this whole thing as a legal defense, The Matrix, as we all know, which came out in 1999, and then its progeny, that movie brought into pop culture a theory that we are all living in a personalized computer simulation or video game, and nothing around us is actually real. But that theory actually goes back as far as Plato's allegory of the cave.
Oh my gosh, bringing this back up.
Uh-huh.
You tease me for going back in time, and we're going back to Plato. I remember this in Philosophy 101.
So the allegory of the cave was a thought experiment where prisoners are chained to a wall and facing the wall, such that the entirety of their reality is the shadows that they can see from a puppet show behind them. And essentially, the thought experiment comes to the idea that our perception is limited and we cannot possibly perceive everything that's going on everywhere. So there's no way to know that we are not characters in a game being controlled by someone we are completely unaware of. There were similar philosophies elsewhere in the world, like the butterfly dream from Zhuangzi from ancient China, the Indian philosophy of Maya, the Aztec philosophical texts that theorized that the world was a painting or a book by Teotl. So this idea of like, is life real, has been going on for ages. It broke into the academic mainstream with Nick Barstrom's 2003 paper called Are You Living in a Computer Simulation?
I heard about this. I heard about this paper.
I remember reading it and being like, this is breaking my brain and I want to stop reading it. That was published in the Philosophical Quarterly, and that brought the philosophy into the mainstream. Mr. Barstrom asserted that we are either almost certainly living in a simulation, or those simulations will never exist. He believed that we would eventually come to a point of being post-human, quote, where humankind has acquired most of the technological capabilities that one can currently show to be consistent with physical laws and with material energy and constraints. Essentially, his theory is that we could convert entire planets into computer programs, and the human mind would become a substrate independent, and the universe may as well run on these computer chips. As people remember from The Matrix, everybody lived in these, like, gelatinous aquatic pod things, and their brain function and their experiences in the Matrix were basically uploaded directly to their brain with a giant needle. So it kind of tracks. Neil deGrasse Tyson also explained this philosophy, and I love him, so I'm just going to quote him directly. He said, "Now you're a character in a world that you think you will have free will, and you say, I want to invent a computer. So you do so. Hey, I want to create a world in my computer. And then that world creates a world in the computer. And then you have simulations all the way down. So now you lay out all these universes and throw a dart. Which of these universes are you most likely to hit? The original one that started it, or the countless simulations, the daughter simulations that unfolded thereafter? You're going to hit one of the simulations." So once you create the computer world, then within that computer world, somebody could create the computer world, and on down, 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 down. The likelihood of whether you're going to pick the real one is infinitely small. And that's when my brain broke, and I was like, I'm going to stop reading. So
This kind of reminds me of that joke philosophical concept about there was a philosopher that was explaining that the world and everything all rested on the back of a giant turtle floating through space, which is the basis of Terry Pratchett's great Autuing, and I love that book series. Talk more about that later. And then it's like, well, what is that turtle riding on? And the philosopher says it's an even larger turtle, and it's like, well, what's that turtle riding on? And the philosopher says it's just turtles all the way down.
Yep. Dr. John Kennedy, who's the director of University of Cincinnati's Institute of Law and Psychology, said that despite this theory being around for a while, the movie introduced it to those who may not have known about it and offered them an explanation for why their lives were fractured without having to admit being sick or different. He said, "It's a much more soothing explanation than admitting that you have a problem." So it was favorable to people who were probably schizophrenic, but didn't want to admit it. The original Matrix defense was put on by Tonda Lynn Ashley from Butler, Ohio. By all accounts, she was generally a normal person, and she had a generally amicable relationship with her landlord, Sherry Lee Corbett. She was always on time with her rent and had no issues with her apartment. There were no quarrels about that contract. But then out of the blue, one day in July 2022, she shot Corbett in the head 3 times, completely unprovoked, in front of a number of people. She went into custody quietly, immediately taking responsibility for what she had done. And upon interrogation, Ainsley stated that she believed that she was in the Matrix. She said that she had some strange dreams with Corbett trying to keep her tethered to the Matrix, so she shot Corbett in an attempt to escape the Matrix. She alluded to the idea that she didn't think she had killed Corbett in reality, and she felt that Corbett, her husband, and others were controlling her dreams, and she found out that these dreams weren't actually dreams. She said, "That's where you go to sleep at night, and they drug you, and they take you somewhere else, and they bring you back and put you in your bed, and you wake up, and you think it's a bad dream." Kind of like the beginning of The Matrix, when Neo first gets picked up and gets the critter shoved into his belly button, and then he wakes up. And he thinks he's back home, and then, 20 minutes later, they suck the critter out of his belly button. He's like, oh, wait, that was real. So that's the headspace that she was in when she committed this offense. It's also noted that she had a hit list of other individuals, including her husband, a psychiatrist, and one other person.
Was she experiencing psychosis?
So they're calling it delusions, which is a part of psychosis. And she also had a psychiatric history. She had previous psychotic breaks. And so based on that and these delusions, she was found not guilty by reason of insanity and sentenced to Twin Valley Behavioral Health Care, the Timothy B. Moritz Forensic Unit, which is like the max security setting of the Twin Valley Behavioral Health Care, based on that she was charged with ag murder, and that's what she was committed under. So in 2005, her treatment team requested that she be moved to a civil treatment center, which is a lower acuity setting, and the court found that to do so would be a public safety threat and denied her motion, and she appealed. Referencing how Oregon does it, if you're committed on a guilty except for insanity in Oregon, you're committed to the PSRB, the Psychiatric Security Review Board, and committed to the hospital and can be stepped down in care. And sometimes within the hospital, There's higher acuity units and lower acuity units. And this was another locked facility that she was asking to go to. So it wasn't like she was asking to leave the hospital. She was asking to go to a lower acuity unit. So
Like,
she had to,
as a part of stepping down, trying to
as a
step
part of
out.
stepping
So,
down. Yeah.
okay.
When you appeal a case from the trial level court, you need to assign error. You need to find things that are things that the trial court did that are errors of law. We talked a little bit about this last week. And so she alleged 2 assignments of error. One was the denial of her request to move to the lower acuity setting against the recommendation of her treatment team. And her other assignment of error was finding that the treating and evaluating doctors were not credible. So on her first assignment of error, there was evidence presented that she was fully compliant with her meds and her treatment, and her mental illness was in remission, and that it would stay in remission if she remained compliant with meds and her aftercare treatment. There was further testimony that she is under heavy supervision at Moritz, and that if she goes off her meds, there would be a bad outcome for both her and for public safety. So those were the 2 competing theories at the trial level. Further testimony came out that the civil unit is also locked, but there would be fewer security staff and up to double the amount of patients. That's what happens when you go into a lower acuity unit. You need a lower to staff to patient ratio at the higher acuity units. And so when you step down to a lower acuity unit, there's essentially going to be less consistent eyes on her.
It might be like you're going from 5 to 1 down to 10 to 1.
Something like that, yeah. There was also testimony that she has decompensated in jail without medication, though she disputes this. And that if she were to leave a setting ensuring that she was taking her meds, she could decompensate and continue to work down her hit list, which Corbett had been on and her husband and these other people were on. So she took issue to the idea that she would escape the facility and stop taking her meds. The appellate court found that she was stable in Moritz, which was the higher acuity unit, for 2 years, and that a reduction in her level of care, quote, would unacceptably reduce all of the components that are currently working to keep appellant compliant and in remission from her mental illness. So on that aspect, the court did not err. And this is something that we run into a lot with civil commitments when somebody is already committed and they're doing a recommitment where the person's doing wildly well, like completely in remission or otherwise just doing really well and really stable. But the court finds that they are stable because of being hospitalized.
I mean, that's going to kind of get you into this no-win situation.
Yeah, exactly.
Where you're just stuck there.
Forever, yeah.
Forever.
No, I've had clients committed for years because of this. But sometimes that comes back on appeal favorably. In this case, it did not. As to her second assignment of error, she alleged an abuse of discretion. These are exceedingly hard to win.
Yeah.
It's partially, like we talked about de novo review a little bit last week. It's kind of like that. You're asking to sort of pierce the veil of the decision of the court to determine whether or not it was sufficiently within the court's discretion to rule as they did. Judges are given a little bit of leeway in how they rule on things because there's a lot that happens at the trial court that isn't necessarily reduced to the record, like someone's body language, facial movements, tone of how they're speaking, things like that, because it's a cold record on appeal. And so there's a lot of deference given to the court's discretion as long as it's not legally wrong. Those are hard to win, and she also didn't win it here. But her argument was that the court disregarded the expert opinions and made a statement regarding their credibility, citing that there was testimony to the contrary. I'm not surprised that this one lost on appeal because you're going to get conflicting testimony. It doesn't sound like the court outright made a credibility finding, and the Court of Appeals actually noted that the statement regarding the testimony to the contrary was a little bit confusing, but it was not a clear enough credibility finding that the Court of Appeals didn't find that that statement amounted to discounting the expert testimony, but rather the court found, based on balancing the evidence, that the safeguards in place at Moritz were necessary to ensure that Ainsley's symptoms remained in remission, and that the trial court's disagreement that she was ready for a lower level of care was not in error. So it took until 2010 for her to finally get unsupervised visits in the community. 3 different doctors testified that her delusional disorder was in remission and that increased freedom would not increase the risk of public safety as long as she stays out of Hamilton, Ohio, and the entire state of Pennsylvania, where her intended victims live.
Okay, no Pennsylvania for you.
Right. So it took 7 years of her being in complete remission for the court to feel comfortable letting her go on unsupervised visits out of the secured facility.
I mean, that's not unusual.
It's not. It is a long time, but again, she was found not guilty for reason of insanity under the ag murder statute.
Yeah. So they have a basically unlimited time frame. So like in Oregon, you can't spend more time in the hospital than the maximum sentence.
Right. An aggravated murder, at least in Oregon, is an unclassified felony.
Yeah.
So there's not really
a maximum.
A maximum. You can be sentenced to life without parole. So
Yeah.
it's
It's not like if somebody commits theft in the 3rd degree.
And it's 30 days. Yeah.
It's 30 days. You got 30 days. You got 1 month. And then no matter what, you're out.
Right. So Ainsley is the most well-known user of the Matrix defense, and she was able to use it because the delusions were so sincerely held that she did not believe that her actions were unlawful. She felt they were justified because these people were trying to keep her in the Matrix, and she did not believe she actually killed them in real life. She thought she just killed their avatar.
But like this is kind of another misnomer. Like the Twinkie defense wasn't really about Twinkies. You're saying
Right.
This is really just a manifestation of a severe mental illness.
Correct.
Like disbelief. She's not successfully arguing that this isn't real.
Right. So essentially, because her defense is based in a delusion, that means that she was not able to conform her actions to the law, and she was unaware that her actions were unlawful, which is the basis of most. I mean, it goes back to the McNaughton rule that we were talking about a few weeks ago. It's the basis of any sort of not guilty by reason of insanity, guilty except for insanity, whatever it's called. While she is the most famous user of the Matrix defense, she was not the first. In 2000, a Swiss exchange student named Vadim Maziges killed, skinned, and dismembered his landlord, blaming both meth use and a fear of getting sucked into the Matrix. He also had a history of mental illness. He had been a prior inpatient mental patient, and he was found not guilty by reason of insanity because of the combination of the psychosis and the meth use. There were also others coming after. One was named Lee Boyd Malvo in 2002.
Oh, he was one of the snipers.
Yes.
BC snipers.
He had a sort of chosen street father figure named John Allen Muhammad. And together they shot 30 people, killing 10 of them in Washington, D.C. over a 3-week period. He stated that the Matrix movie held the key to understanding him. While in custody, he was writing things like "Free yourself from the Matrix," "You are a slave to the Matrix's control," things like that, the kinds of things that Morpheus was telling Neo in the movie. He also pled not guilty by reason of insanity, but his attorneys actually focused more on video games than on the Matrix movie. And this was a really big sort of legal movement in the late 90s, early aughts, that kids growing up on these super violent video games will also not really know the difference between real and make-believe, because they're spending 6, 8, 10 hours a day playing these video games where they're killing people left, right, and center. The theory was essentially that somehow dampened their ability to understand that shooting people in real life is bad. And so that's more what that defense was based on, was the fact that he was playing video games that were super, super violent. And based on that, he didn't understand that shooting people in real life is wrong.
I mean, he was also a child, and he had been heavily indoctrinated
by
his
by
own father figure.
yeah, by Mr. Muhammad. And that just shows how malleable kids' brains are. We talked a little bit
Yeah.
about that earlier. And if they get in with the wrong parent figure, that can be exceedingly detrimental to their development, to their understanding of how the world works. There was another individual in 2003 named Josh Cook who murdered his adoptive parents. What happened was he was in his room after dinner listening to Bodies by Downing Pool, and he looked at his Matrix poster and then to his shotgun. And he had been sort of modeling his persona after Neo for a bit. And so he had the black combat boots, he had the black long leather trench coat, and he put those on and he grabbed his shotgun because it looked like the gun that was in the movie. And he loaded his pockets up with shotgun shells. And then he said he felt like he was in the Matrix and that the murders didn't seem real. Prior to trial, he was evaluated and found to be under the bona fide belief that he was living in the Matrix. This is what we call a delusion. He was obsessed with the movie and thought it was real. But that defense started to fall apart when the 911 calls were played and he didn't sound delusional. He, on those 911 calls, acknowledged that he would probably get the death penalty for what he did, which shows a greater connection with reality than any sort of mental health defense would generally suggest. He eventually abandoned the Matrix defense and took responsibility for the murders. He had no previous psychiatric history, but he did later learn that both of his biological parents had been diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia, which allowed him to see a psychiatrist prior to sentencing. And that psychiatrist diagnosed him with simple schizophrenia, which means that the person's aware of and can describe the outside world, but cannot describe what it meant to him, and that other people are scarcely real to him. And this came actually as a relief to Cook, who now had an explanation for why he always felt different rather than the Matrix. The paranoid schizophrenia and simple schizophrenia are really old diagnosis labels. Now it's schizophrenia spectrum. Most things will just fall under that umbrella. If you can't quite hit all of the widgets for schizophrenia, you'll see people diagnosed with schizophrenia spectrum and other psychotic disorder, which I think is probably what this simple schizophrenia is probably more akin to today. It just means that there's a lot of stuff there that could suggest schizophrenia, but you don't have the 6 months that you need of symptoms, or you're not just quite hitting all of those widgets, but there's clearly some sort of psychotic disorder there. It used to be called psychotic disorder not otherwise specified. Now under the DSM-5, again, everything is a spectrum.
Everything's a spectrum.
So schizophrenia spectrum and other psychotic disorder. One other person in 2003, Matthew Lovett, was arrested before he and his accomplices could launch a Columbine-style assault. He would call himself Neo, and he wrote in his diary, "I have a whole new reason to do this now after watching The Matrix Reloaded." So, one might imagine that with all of these Matrix defenses popping up, Warner Brothers, who made the movie, might be a little bit concerned. And yes, in fact, in 2003, they did issue a statement including, quote, "Any attempt to link these crimes with a motion picture is disturbing and irresponsible." Which is such a cover your ass type statement because, yeah, if people are mentally well, they need to take responsibility for what they're doing. But at the same time, when you are creating a movie that creates this false reality, if people have underlying psychotic disorders, it's going to be something that they latch onto.
Yeah, I mean, we saw that also with prior to The Matrix with the movie Natural Born Killers.
Yes.
And people emulating that. And that movie itself is supposed to be a parody of violence and culture. And so it was
right.
Pretty ironic that it was used to commit violence.
Well, and I mean, it's the same thing as the defenses coming up in the 90s and the early aughts about video game violence, right?
Yeah, video game violence. We saw it very recently, the famous case with the two girls and their belief in Slender Man and the murder of another young girl. But that was a combination of multiple things, including one of the children being profoundly, deeply mentally ill. When I have migraines and I take my migraine medication, it makes things that I see not seem real. It's not like I'm outside of reality, and it's because migraines and the medication screw with your visual cortex. It is very unsettling. So I've experienced that
Well,
during that time period.
and when they first put you on antidepressants, there's a warning that there's going to be like a dip before you actually start seeing progress on it. And there was a period of time, I was maybe like a week into being on antidepressants, that nothing felt real.
Yeah.
And it was really fucking scary.
It's
And I can imagine when that is your entire reality, that everybody's telling you this, that, and the other is real, and it doesn't seem real. And the things that do feel real, people are saying that they don't see, how incredibly terrifying that can be, and how incredibly unsafe you can feel, and why that might lead to you lashing out against something that's making you feel unsafe.
Yeah, I think mine was less scary than your experience when I have this migraine thing. It just, everything kind of seems like it's from almost like a sepia tone picture. I don't see things that aren't there. It's just the things that are there seem like, oh, it's weird that that's there. I describe it as being kind of in like a real life episode of Is It Cake? You just wouldn't be surprised if it was cake. I don't see things that aren't there. I'm just kind of surprised. It's less unsettling. It is freaky, but I will say, and it only happens when I have a migraine and then I take the migraine medication. It is a not uncommon side effect of this migraine medication, but it's better than experiencing the pain and nausea of the migraine,
Absolutely.
and it goes
Absolutely.
away. But it is certainly unsettling when
Right.
that
And just
happens.
imagine that being your entire
Yeah.
existence. A lot of the stigma around mental illness is people seeing decompensated people who are unhoused on the street, talking to themselves, screaming at traffic, things like that, that make it really hard to sympathize with somebody because you have no idea what they're feeling. But if you take a moment to actually think about what they're feeling, their reactions make a lot of sense.
What I explain to people when they're surprised, the layperson, because I have over the course of my career worked with quite a few people who have schizoaffective disorder. You work with more,
Yep.
but
Well, and just so an explanation, schizoaffective disorder is kind of like a combination of schizophrenia and bipolar disorder,
yeah,
where you have the delusions, psychosis, hallucinations of schizophrenia plus a mood component, either manic or depressive, or both.
yes, and the features of the schizophrenia can ebb and flow.
Hmm.
So there's periods of time where it's a lot worse, and then there's periods of time where it's a lot better. But when you're talking about that kind of disorder, which people are very afraid of, the primary feature of that is disorganized thinking.
Yep.
It's not like they're going to go kill you. And
What
people with severe mental illness are far, 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 far more likely to be victims of violent crimes than perpetrators.
Right. So disorganized thinking means that the person is not able to think in a linear fashion. Like you and I are talking right now, we're having a back and forth, we're able to form coherent thoughts. When somebody is having disorganized thinking and it comes out as disorganized speech, it's what is referred to as word salad. Like it does not make sense. There may be some lucid moments where they're able to complete a full sentence, but that sentence may be based in delusion, or just generally what they're saying doesn't make sense in the real world.
Or they're getting very lost in what you're trying to say to them.
Mm-hmm.
And the verbal acuity is really not there. So you're drawing pictures and writing things out and doing diagrams because their brain is scrambling what you're saying to them.
Yep. Whatever you can do to help base that person in consensus reality. It may not work because, frankly, if they're very, very ill, it takes quite a bit to bring them back, whether that's medications, therapy, or both. In a fitness to proceed context, I've seen people restore to competency without medications who have some pretty significant delusions, but that's the rare case.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the greater case is that people will need some sort of medical intervention in order to restore to competency, just because these illnesses are so profoundly disorienting that there's medical intervention that's necessary.
It is a real privilege to work with people who, and it's just like a damn shame that it's because they're involved in the criminal justice system. That's the first time they've had access to meaningful, consistent healthcare. But to see people become restored to competency and come back to consensus reality and be able to witness that massive anxiety and panic go down is
And it can be a complete night and day.
yeah,
I've seen people who have significant delusions that just are off the wall from consensus reality. And then they get on the right medication, and suddenly they're holding down a job,
yeah.
and they're able to get their driver's license, they're able to finish school, whatever it is. And it's all because of this little pill that they're taking
Yeah.
every day.
The magic of modern chemistry has assisted them. That's a really wonderful part of the job, is to see people kind of come back to life. It's kind of like watching clients get clean and sober,
Yeah.
and they're coming back to life, they're enjoying things, because the people that I've worked with that are experiencing delusions or hallucinations is terrifying
Mhm.
for them. They're living in the scariest possible world, and
It's like the worst acid trip of your life every single day.
every single day, and just the tremendous anxiety. So if you take a moment to be with these people and try and empathize with them, then everything becomes a lot, becomes easier to empathize. And so just to take those moments.
And also just understanding that they're not choosing to be unhoused. They're not choosing to be where they're at. They may have been on medications at one point and gone off those medications. That is also based on the illness. Because the medications at any medication at any dose will only work appropriately for so long. You will eventually build a tolerance to any medication, even Advil. Once they have gotten to a point where they have started to outgrow that medication dosage, unless they're actively working with a psychiatrist to monitor that,
Mhm.
they may start again having the delusions that there's nothing wrong with them, that the medication is poison, and then they go off their medications. And then once they're off their medications and they're no longer living in consensus reality, it's very difficult for them to hold down a job, which is required for them to pay rent. It's very hard for them to be organized enough to show up to work, be organized enough to be at work and do their job.
To be able to think, I need to go to the doctor.
Yeah,
To
exactly.
maintain, like, signing up for health insurance is difficult. So whenever I see my neighbors, because unhoused people are your neighbors,
Absolutely.
they are just as much your neighbor as a person who lives in a house who lives next door to you. Oh, that is a real failure of our society, that we don't have an adequate care system or supported living system for people to have access to the supports that they need to stay on medication, because it's better quality of life if they were housed and on appropriate medications, but people just need support with that.
And we're not offering that support,
No.
right? I've mentioned this before, partly because it's my pet peeve right now. But House Bill 2005, that was passed by the Oregon legislature, did a fantastic thing of creating some changes to the zoning laws, which makes it easier for somebody to build a secure residential treatment facility or residential treatment home next to a psychiatric hospital and vice versa, which is great. It eliminates one piece of red tape to build more beds, which is what we need, is more beds, both at the inpatient and the outpatient and the residential level. All levels, we need more beds. What they did not do was tie any money to it. So we now have the legal ability to build all these beds, but there's no money in it. There's no money to do it, and nobody has money to do it because it's really fucking expensive to build a hospital.
And so here's my pet peeve of the day, since we're listing them out. So I work with a lot of young people, a lot of serious mental health conditions. The onset is the teen years.
Yes, teens and early 20s.
So I'll see more of my clients than what our average would be. We're just discovering, oh, this is early onset schizophrenia. This is bipolar 1. They might have other conditions. What they need is something that's the equivalent to DD services with supported housing and lifetime supported housing, like an adult
Mm-hmm.
foster home. And if your primary problem or condition is mental health, even if you have intellectual disabilities that might otherwise qualify you for DD services, if the primary problem is determined to be mental health, you cannot access disability services, and mental health is not considered a qualifying disability. And I think it's called Title K program, is nowhere near sufficient, and it's really, really difficult to get people into lifetime supported housing. I don't understand why we're living in a state that doesn't consider a serious mental health problem, which is disabling under the federal guidelines, to not be a disability under disability services.
Yeah, disability services really only applies to people who have either an organic deficiency in their intellect or some sort of brain injury before the age of 18. And
And
it
you
has to
have
be
to have received services.
it has to be documented prior to the age of 18 in order to be able to enroll in DD services. Unfortunately, yeah, that's not available for people with severe and persistent mental illness. I guess the state is just expecting the civil commitment system to deal with those people, or the public guardian system, which there are not enough public guardians. Every time they make money for more public guardians, it's gone in a matter of months. And there are far, far more people who need it than there's money for.
I live on a street with an adult foster home, and I'm a big fan of the adult foster system. It's way better than the child foster system. So much. By such an exponential degree, I can't even begin to describe it.
There's actual licensing rules.
Oh my God. Real training, independence, supported, it's truly supported living.
Right.
And I'm super happy. There's this lovely house with a nice yard. They just put up these really cute decorations. I'm happy to have that home as a part of my neighborhood. I wish that there are more. There's a lot of adult foster homes. So if you need it, there's one available. You can get a bed and you can move cities. You can live close to your family.
They're easier to get than psychiatric beds, but
oh my gosh,
there's still a wait list.
There's a wait list, but there's openings.
Yeah.
For youth that need a DD foster home. It's way easier for me to have like a teenage client get into a DD foster home than into a regular foster home, because people don't want to foster teens. Entering into that system, you see the genuine support for people to be successful, cared about as individuals, really well-trained providers in most circumstances.
Absolutely. If there's a report of abuse or neglect, then the home can get shut down. There's actual accountability, as opposed to in foster care.
The rate of abuse.
Children, it's terrific, and people will collect these kids as an income.
Yeah. The rate of abuse for Oregon's children in foster care is way higher than most other states. We're one of the highest rates of abuse of any state in the United States.
And I think part of the issue with that, aside from just people doing it for the wrong reasons, is that the agency will tend to believe the foster home over the bio parents. When I was doing dependency, I had several clients say, like, I found a bruise on my kid, it looks like a belt, whatever it was. And I helped them bring it to the caseworker's attention, and the caseworker was like, oh, the foster parent denied it, and that's where we're going to leave it.
I don't know a single attorney who in dependency that hasn't been part of shutting down a regular foster home. I've helped shut down some licensed facilities. Anyway, that is that. Well, thank you so much for telling me about the Matrix defense, which is actually just another mental health defense.
Another mental health defense. And this will probably, at least for the moment, be our last mental health case. We had a big series of them, but next week we are engaging in the Tale of Two Bundys.
I will be talking about a genuinely dumb defense by serial killer Ted Bundy.
And I will be discussing Ammon Bundy's gallivants in Eastern Oregon and Nevada.
Yes. Well, thank you, friends. And hi, Mom. Frankie, don't you dare cut that.
I didn't last week, and I won't this week.
Okay.
And I apologize for cutting it out the first 2 weeks. Judah does love you.
Okay,
All right.
bye.
Like, subscribe, share. Please help us grow this podcast, and we will see you next week.
See you next week.
All right.